Hello, everyone. This is Pamela Topjian. I am your host for Holistic Connections, Conversations with Holistic Practitioners. And I will let my guest introduce herself and share what you do in the holistic healing space, please.
Hi, well, thank you for having me. I'm Amanda. I teach meditation. So I started that when I decided to take a course with David Nichtern. I don't know if you're familiar,
No?
but he's a great meditation teacher. He kind of came over with the 1970s. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche arrived in America, to start teaching meditation to us Westerners.
Yeah.
And he was there for that. And so
Nice.
that led to his, over 40 years of teaching himself. And now he trains people. And I was one of his students. So that's
Nice.
how I became a meditation teacher. And yeah, that's what
And
I
what's
have.
his last name again? I'm writing this down.
Oh yeah, it's David Nichtern. I
Okay.
actually came across him, funnily enough, through an animated character that he
Hmm.
voiced.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
He was a
Interesting.
meditation teacher in the cartoon.
Yeah. So he was kind of animating himself. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really
Awesome.
funny. It was like my first interaction with him wasn't even really fully his visual.
Right, right. Just his voice playing himself as a cartoon. How interesting. How fun.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
how did you first become interested? When did you want to learn about meditation? Or maybe, when did you first, were you always meditating your whole life and then you decided you wanted to teach it to other people? Or how did that come about for you?
Yeah, no, so the journey is always so interesting. That's my
Yeah.
favorite part about meditation is the journey is always ongoing.
Yeah.
And I would say when I was young, I was very aware. I was like hyper aware of things that it felt like I could read people's, energy almost behind
Mm,
words. And I didn't have words for it at the time.
yeah.
But sadly, I did not get introduced to meditation, very young. I would say my first encounter with it was as a teenager getting into the Beatles and being really into
Mm,
George Harrison
yeah.
and their whole trip, and how they learned about meditation and spirituality. And it really stuck with George out of all the
Yeah.
Beatles, and he's my favorite Beatles. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was that was like my first introduction was hearing him talk about awareness and talk
Cool.
about these holistic ways of changing himself. So that was probably like the teenage introduction. I didn't really practice still. I didn't know anyone who knew about the practice. It wasn't very popular until I would say the last 5 to 10 years. Then found out I was going to become a mother. And
Oh,
so that was what made me want to really understand how to be like the most mindful individual so
yeah.
I could feel like I was being the most mindful parent to my child. And so that was the real like jump start
Right.
into,
Turning point for you. Yeah.
yeah. And
Motherhood,
so,
parenthood
yeah.
always does that. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So when you work with people, do you work with people one-on-one or in groups? Are you doing like large classes? Is it online or in person, or how does that work?
So I usually teach mostly virtually, actually one on one. It's kind of just what I fell in love with the most. And I also have taught in my town here in Ohio, and that was a joy. We actually
Mm-hmm.
sadly had a yoga studio that closed this
Oh,
past year. I know it didn't make it, and so that's where I taught in person the most, and that was
oh,
great.
okay.
So I have a lot of experience in person with group settings too, which I love, and
Yeah.
hoping to find a new home for that locally so I can have that connection as well because they're both so fun.
Yeah, that's too bad. And I've never been to Ohio, but I kind of get the feeling that it's not really the most open place for holistic practices. Am I wrong about that or
No, you're definitely not wrong, sadly. So
yeah.
it was a nice run here. I had hoped that more people in the town would be interested.
Yeah.
Um, and there were so many wonderful human beings that I've met that I'm still so close with, and we meet up
Oh,
at
good.
parks and still have sits. So those
Yeah.
connections, so it did spark something beautiful in the city. But it is Ohio is a very, I would say split state, and
Hmm.
it's just like there's a little bit of everything here, and it is not necessarily a place for that. But I think that was another thing that had me so curious and wanting to teach was a motivator was seeing that there aren't a lot of people around
Yeah.
me who clearly are aware and
Yeah.
who are meditating and who are slow to respond and who are clear minded. There's a lot more of the, I would say, lack of clarity going
Yeah.
on. And so that motivated me to be like, well, if I want my daughter to grow up in a world that has that as a priority, then I'm going to have to be active in this. And so
Yeah.
that's, again, more of a push. And that's what
Right.
led to becoming a teacher because
Yeah,
it's so
living by
important.
example. Yeah. Does she meditate with you? Are you teaching her to?
Yeah, she's 7 and
Okay.
it's more of a like she does it on her own. I think it is true. You just mentioned a second ago, leading by example, like
Yeah.
living by example. And I think if even if you're not a parent, you can relate to it, maybe having been parented, you really start to model the behaviors you enjoy about your parents.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
usually tend to repeat those more than, the neurotic negatives that every human being offers. You tend to like attach yourself and behave in the positive ways. And I think so that has led to her own curiosity about the practice
Yeah.
and her own experience of it. And kids, it's really interesting. They don't really need it. They're kind of already,
They're living in the moment for sure.
yeah. So there's no
Yeah.
pressure from mom to like be rigid about it because it
Hmm.
hasn't really had to be a thing.
What would you say to people who feel like they can't meditate?
Hmm. Yeah, I tend to find that the people who say they can't meditate or find it more struggling actually seem to get more clarity from taking like a more scientific lens on the practice.
Hmm.
So it seems like people who are more in that mindset
Yeah.
like understand it more scientifically than they do spiritually. And so to them, I usually say, well, what's really happening? Thankfully, we have scientific studies about the practice now. We can actually see that, white matter is growing in the brain when someone
Hmm.
takes on a mindfulness meditation practice. And like that increase is going to lead to better communication in the brain. And then, that amygdala shrinking is going to not trigger your fight or flight. And like these are physical things that are happening. And so
Yeah.
usually when someone hits me with that perception on it, I'll say, these are like things you can look up and research through many different places. And I think when someone understands that, it's almost like how they understand how working out might cause a muscle to grow.
Yeah.
And I think that that helps people who think that way understand it. So that's usually how I would answer that question of like, well, I can't do it. It's like, let's find out why you would do it first. Because
Yeah.
maybe then your will start to grow on that you can do this
Right, to
practice.
have some motivation to want to continue to try, yeah, in different ways. So when you're teaching, are
Mhm.
you doing guided meditations when you're teaching? Is that just part of it or not at all? Are you teaching people how to go within themselves, like with a mindful meditation, compared to like a transcendental meditation?
Yeah.
So when you're teaching, how are you going about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many beautiful practices, and that's another wonderful part of the journey is
Yeah,
trying so many different ones out and taking and leaving what works and doesn't work for you.
yeah,
But I try to really put a foundation on the mindfulness practice. And I know it gets a little like boring to some people because it's very simple, but I do insist that that is the foundation of my
yeah,
students' practice. So every time we meet one on one, we are going to, sit in silence and you are going to
good.
practice your mindfulness practice. But I do also have a lot of fun because I am a creative person and I love to write, doing guided meditations as well that
Hmm.
you were describing, where I try to find out, where the person's at that meeting, find out how they're feeling, and pull from anything I've already written because I kind of have them all rehearsed in my head now.
Yeah.
Um, and and see if that's going to work for them, if that's going to help them that day, or it's kind of like a intuitive thing at that point, which is
Yeah.
what your listeners are probably interested in as well with all these holistic practices, is that understanding of like that connection and that awareness. I think it can happen through a computer screen between two people
Yeah.
very easily if you're a good listener, and if you're a good meditator, you're a good listener. So
Yeah, yeah. I think that you have to want to. You can't have somebody else say, "Hey, my partner really wanted me to do this." So,
yeah,
rather than them being interested themselves. So you have to want to do it yourself, I think is important. And that's with anything really, with any type of healing, you have to want it for
yeah.
yourself and you can't do it for anybody else, but you can lead the way. So, can you explain what some of the benefits are? So, there are people out here, and hopefully, some people that are listening that are interested in meditation, but just really have never tried it or never was sure if it was right for them or don't know what they could get out of it. So, what are some of the benefits of having a mindful meditation practice?
Yeah, so this, increase in awareness, this like higher awareness, learning to take this seat, it is an earned experience, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of comes to you through that consistency in that practice. And I'll speak to what I'm working with my students mostly,
Mm-hmm.
because I do host a podcast myself,
Mm-hmm.
podcast sisters here.
Yeah.
It's a podcast about music and art and film and authors, and like all these creative people come on, and we
Yeah.
just kind of talk about what they do. And I, because of my seat as a meditation teacher, we always end up talking about like the deeper meanings of things,
Right.
more interesting aspects of awareness. And so that has led to me having more creative students typically. So it's not like I wouldn't work with anyone. You don't have to be a creative
Right.
student.
Yeah.
It's just that's what I've seemed to attract into my world, which is
Yeah.
amazing. And I will say, like, the side effects, anyone can Google and find out the basic health side effects of
Mm-hmm.
meditation practice. So I'll let you do that. If you're listening to her show, I'm sure you already know a lot of them, but I'll talk about something I think is a little more interesting once you peel back those layers, which is
Okay.
like creative innovation. So creativity, even if you don't consider yourself creative,
Mm-hmm.
you're creating every day. And that creativity can be limited by your inability to think outside the norm.
Yeah.
So I'll let you think about that for a second. And creativity has the power to manifest something from your mind into reality. So that can be as simple as a certain baked good at home, something you thought of into reality, just to
Yeah.
keep it really simple. And then when we meditate, we rest in that awareness we've been talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like our own unique spaciousness. It feels like all of a sudden you've dropped in, you're aware, there's nothing else pulling you anywhere. But that innovation cannot happen without creativity. So to
Yeah.
me, they're kind of like tied together in a way. So your
Yeah.
creativity can be really, really tuned into when you're an avid meditator. And I'm finding, working with creative people and my own creative practices, like that's an advancement in like human awareness, in my opinion. Like that's no small thing. It might
Absolutely.
sound a little artsy, whatever, but I know by seeing people produce artwork in their passion
Yeah.
after really committing to a meditation practice, it's like their lens is so clear. It's only their voice. And that's what makes it profound, right? Like art touches us
Yeah.
when we can see that that is exactly the human mirror looking back at us.
Yeah.
Like that's how we all connect.
So would you say that has been something that surprised you since starting this? That it really opens the door for more creativity and really there's definitely a huge connection there. I meditate almost daily and I would say that I'm creative in certain ways. Definitely there's a huge connection there. So is that something that surprised you? That there was that connection when you first started? Were you starting meditation for one thing and then you're like, oh, this also
That's
has a
a really
connection?
good question. And I've actually never thought about like chicken or the egg there.
Yeah.
But I would
Yeah.
say I was like an artist first.
Yeah.
And I would say that through art, in the many different times and ways it's manifested in my life where I've been creating,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that what I love about it was being in that state of awareness.
Yeah.
I didn't know have words,
Mm-hmm.
or I wasn't able to get out of the thought stream long enough at those younger ages as well to realize that, oh my gosh, this is why I love this. And
Yeah.
now that I've spent so many years as a meditator, it's like I can answer any question about anything that I love. And those are all creative things,
Yeah.
like creation itself. So
Nice.
I think it's kind of I'm glad you asked that, because it is kind of like, wow, which came first?
Thought-provoking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which came first? But really, I would say I was just being a creative human
Right.
who learned the value of like tuning into that more consistently instead of tuning into what's trying to pull you away from you.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you are creating, whether it's an art form or, even writing or your podcast or whatever it is, because there's so many different ways to be creative. But when you're creating something, you kind of get into, people will say, I'm in the zone. And that's really almost a form of meditation. Like people will talk about a walking meditation, going through a labyrinth or even just alone in the woods or whatever. But even when, you can be painting something or writing and you're just so focused on just that, and that's a type of meditation in itself. And I think that people might not realize that, that they are, if people aren't meditating and they're creative, they probably don't realize that they already have gotten into those states of like deepened awareness, like you said. So yeah, yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that flow state is like it's an
Yeah,
actual psychosomatic experience.
yeah,
And you just might not know that you're in it. It is like the, little kid coloring at the table. It's
right.
like they're fully present.
All in.
Yeah, they're all in. Like they're translating art. They're translating art live. And yeah, you can what you learn about meditation and flow is again how they are tied together.
Hmm.
And when you learn to meditate, one of the most beautiful things is you learn to separate yourself from your thoughts. And in that lesson, you realize that a lot of those things that get in the way, like thinking that you've had a failure in the creative process,
Yeah,
okay, well, maybe that's just a predecessor to your future success.
yeah,
Maybe that's something that needed to happen for you to know where the thing was going.
absolutely.
That flip of a switch cannot happen if you're not able to
Yeah.
get out of the, oh, I failed. I
Hmm.
failed. This isn't going well. Maybe I should just quit this. That is easier to deal with if you're constantly able to separate yourself from your thoughts, investigate how true they are. How many
Yeah.
things am I ignoring to see the truth, to live in this little negative thought? These
Yeah.
sort of things are a big deal. And that's dealing with the internal distraction, and it
Hmm.
also helps with external distraction. So when we're in our outside world, flow state is immediately interrupted as soon as that little phone beeps. Flow
Right.
state is immediately interrupted when an ad for something pops up somewhere in your house somehow and like
Yeah.
attacks you. Flow state is immediately interrupted a lot of ways that you can also consider, but you're not going to consider them if you don't understand the value of that flow state and you don't
Yeah.
understand the value of being present.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Thank you for that. Um, so you mentioned your podcast a little bit, and I don't want to completely ignore it, even though it's not really as much about meditation or that, but it's called Awareness with Amanda Lynn. So it's a little play on your name there, right? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
spelled
Yes, I was.
Amandolin rather than like your name, Amanda Lynn. And you have, like you said, you have conversations with musicians, artists, authors, animators, and more. All, like you said, all creative things, creative people. And yeah, and I'm sure that you do get into some of the more mindfulness parts of their creative process with that too. So you want to talk about your podcast a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of started it because I was interested in podcasts and I had a few that I listened to on occasion. And I thought there's not a show like what I would dream a show would be. And
Yeah.
I interestingly, after a meditation, I wrote down what that would be. And I thought, why do I assume that that shouldn't be me? And again, being a meditator, you hear that thought of why am I, not just going for it? And oh, it's one of the best decisions ever because it was like overnight, everything in the world aligned. Like my animator friend wanted to make the art for it. And then
Nice.
it just started happening. And it was like it went from that thought to reality, which is like every time you can take that jump, anyone listening, take it. Every time, take it because you don't know where it's going to go. And because it went there, I got to literally work with my dream students, like I just described,
Yeah.
which is something that I think I would have struggled to find any other way other than being open to, hey, let me put a spotlight on the underground culture because
Yeah.
there's a lot of beautiful, wonderful, creative things happening there. with art, and
Hmm.
it's not getting the attention it deserves because honestly, I think it's talking about things that we're talking about today, which is changing perception on reality, which is
Yeah.
challenging to the status quo. And when we challenge the status quo, it tends to be more of pushing a boulder up a hill to get a lot of recognition, I feel. They love, raising up and holding up
Yeah.
people that continue the status quo. So when you're out here, trying to get everyone to think a different way, it tends to be a little more difficult. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, we should give those people voices because they're making and writing songs that are profound. There's a voice behind that wants to tell a story. And it's also fun and silly sometimes. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's like really deep emotional moments with me and
Hmm.
the guest. And it is this beautiful spectrum, which I love because that's life, right? So anytime we can have a show or a medium that's willing to say life is this huge plethora of emotions and they're all equal and they're all beautiful and let's experience them together. And I feel like I try to just kind of do that in a show where
Yeah.
the niche was art and the niche was like holding up artists that I think deserve more of a voice because they're doing something pretty far out.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. That's most podcast platforms. Yeah.
Spotify, podcasts. If you want to keep up with the show, you can check out my Instagram. That's where I'm most engaging on social media if you have
Okay.
questions or
Okay.
want to check out the show.
Yeah. And so also, where's the best place to reach you for the meditation?
Check out the Patreon, which has the link in my description over on Instagram. My
Okay.
Instagram's just underscore Amandolin. You can even just message me on there. I
Okay.
try to check even messages from people that I haven't gotten to yet. I try to check at least once a week. So
Yeah.
if you have questions, you can talk to me there first. But I have a Patreon link on there, and people can see how if they support that, they get a meditation every month.
Nice.
You can meditate with me more than that, but it's a really fun way to connect every month. People who, even if you don't listen to the show and you're just interested in the meditation part, and you felt like a connection listening, maybe I'm the right fit, and you could check it out and see. And you can
Yeah.
ask me anything on there. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll put that stuff in the show notes and then in the description on YouTube. So please, please, please check that out. Um, and so, is there anything else that you would like to share or make sure that people know before we end this today?
Yeah. I think just remembering that presence really is the goal. And whatever you're doing, even if you just have this moment listening to Pamela and I today, please, right after you're done, just take a moment, take a few deep breaths, try to get in touch with that awareness. Know that you can, and know that there's someone out there who can help you on the path anywhere locally if you need that in-person connection. It does not have to be me. I just encourage everyone to at least start researching your meditation journey. Pick
Yeah,
up a book that grabs your eye. Just let something kind of change the lens you're used to for a little bit,
yeah,
because you'll find that once you start to get interested in that clarity, you'll see that it's worth your time. I don't know. It's pretty far out. I just
yeah.
like knowing other people could hear that and change their life tomorrow, literally.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I love that. Great message. And yeah, absolutely life-changing for sure. You just never know who it's going to really touch and have meaning for. So that's awesome. So thank you so much. So check out her Instagram, check out the Patreon, and check out the podcast and all of that. And that will all be below, like I said. So thank you so much, Amanda, for being my
Yeah.
guest today. I'm sure that the audience, the listeners, the watchers have learned something, and I hope that they will all reach out to you.
Oh, I
So thank
appreciate
you.
you. Yeah, thank you and continue enjoying this new journey of yours.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is exciting. Thanks for asking for me to come on.
Yeah, absolutely.